Commander Zektar had served in the Galactic Defense Coalition for over 2 decades. His chitinous exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles against the Void Swarm, and his 4 eyes had witnessed horrors that would break lesser minds. Yet nothing in his extensive military career had prepared him for the moment he first laid eyes on the human contingent. Arriving at Station Omega-7, the transport ship docked with a mechanical precision that impressed even the notoriously perfectionist Zektar. Through the reinforced viewing port, he watched as the airlock cycled and the first human soldiers emerged. They were smaller than he had expected. These bipedal mammals from the outer rim world called Earth. Their pale skin seemed fragile compared to his own armored carapace, and their single pair of eyes appeared almost comically limited. Captain Sarah Chen stepped forward as the human delegation's leader. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her uniform bore insignia that Zektar's translator identified as belonging to something called the Terran Marine Corps. She moved with a fluid grace that reminded him of the predatory stalkers from his home world, but there was something else in her bearing that he couldn't quite identify. "Commander Zektar," Chen said, extending her hand in the peculiar human greeting ritual. "Thank you for agreeing to this joint operation. I know our species haven't worked together before." Zektar accepted the gesture, noting how warm her skin felt against his chitinous appendage. "Captain Chen, your reputation precedes you." The Battle of Kepler Station was impressive. He had reviewed the tactical reports, though they seemed almost too extraordinary to believe. A single human ship had held off an entire Void Swarm flotilla for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. "Just doing our job, sir," Chen replied with what Zektar's cultural database identified as humility. "My team is ready to integrate with your forces. We've studied your combat doctrine and believe we can adapt effectively." The next several hours involved briefings, equipment checks, and tactical planning. Zektar found himself grudgingly impressed by the humans' professionalism. They asked intelligent questions, offered practical suggestions, and displayed a level of technical competence that surprised him. Their weapons were crude by galactic standards but appeared to be well maintained and effective. What puzzled him most was their apparent fearlessness. The briefing materials clearly outlined the nature of their upcoming mission: a direct assault on a Void Swarm hive ship that had been terrorizing shipping lanes in the Beta Quadrant. It was the kind of operation that even veteran coalition forces approached with considerable trepidation. The Void Swarm were nightmarish creatures that existed somewhere between energy and matter, capable of phasing through most conventional defenses and feeding on both biological and technological systems. Yet the humans listened to the briefing with calm attention, taking notes and asking tactical questions as if they were planning a routine patrol. Lieutenant Martinez, a young human male with kind eyes, even made what appeared to be a joke that caused his companions to emit the barking sound Zektar had learned, indicated amusement. "Are your people truly not concerned about facing the swarm?" Zektar asked Chen during a private moment between briefings. Chen considered the question carefully. "Oh, we're concerned, Commander. But fear is just information. It tells us what's dangerous and what we need to prepare for. We don't let it paralyze us." This philosophical approach to fear fascinated Zektar. In his culture, fear was a weakness to be overcome through discipline and training. The humans seemed to view it as simply another tactical consideration. The assault began at 800 ship time. The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the target system, where long-range sensors had detected the massive Void Swarm hive ship. It was a writhing mass of dark energy and corrupted metal nearly 3 kilometers long, surrounded by a cloud of smaller drone entities that pulsed with malevolent purpose. Zektar commanded the operation from the bridge of the Coalition dreadnought Stellar Hammer, while Chen led her Marines aboard their own assault ship, the Indomitable. The plan was straightforward. The main fleet would engage the hive ship's outer defenses while the human boarding party attempted to penetrate the vessel's core and plant fusion charges at critical structural points. The battle began with a massive exchange of energy weapons. The Coalition ships opened fire with their plasma cannons, while the Void Swarm responded with streams of corrosive energy that ate through even reinforced hull plating. Zektar watched on his tactical display as green and red indicators showed the ebb and flow of combat across the battlefield. Then something unexpected happened. As the human assault ship approached the hive ship's docking bays, it came under concentrated fire from a pack of void wraiths. fast-moving swarm entities that could phase in and out of normal space. Zektar expected the humans to retreat and request support, as standard coalition doctrine demanded. Instead, the Indomitable accelerated directly into the attack. Chen's voice crackled over the comm channel. "All units, this is Marine Leader. We're going in hot. Hammer, maintain covering fire on our flanks." Zektar watched in amazement as the human ship performed a series of aggressive maneuvers that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. It spun and twisted through the Wraith attacks, its point defense systems firing continuously. Several Wraiths managed to latch onto the hull, their energy tendrils beginning to drain the ship's power systems. What happened next would stay with Zektar for the rest of his life. Instead of attempting to shake off the parasitic entities, Captain Chen ordered her ship to ram directly into the hive ship's hull. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels, but it also crushed several Wraiths against the alien metal and allowed the Marines to breach the enemy ship's outer barriers. "Boarding successful," Chen reported, her voice steady despite the chaos Zektar could hear in the background. "Beginning sweep of target zones. Estimated time to objective, 30 minutes. As Zektar listened to the combat reports filtering in from inside the hive ship, he realized that his understanding of warfare was about to change fundamentally. The humans weren't just brave or skilled. There was something else about them, something that made them different from every other species he had encountered. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Zektar felt a cold sensation in his primary neural cluster that he recognized as the beginning of fear. Not fear of the enemy, but fear of his allies. The interior of the Void Swarm hive ship defied conventional understanding of architecture. Walls seemed to pulse with a sickly bioluminescence, and the corridors twisted in directions that hurt to contemplate. The air itself felt wrong, thick with an energy that made Zektar's instruments fluctuate wildly as he monitored the human boarding party's progress. Through the helmet cameras of the Marine squad, he watched Captain Chen lead her team deeper into the alien vessel. The humans moved with practiced efficiency, their weapons raised and their formation tight. What struck Zektar most was their apparent adaptation to the nightmare environment around them. Where his own troops would have needed extensive psychological conditioning to function in such a place, the humans simply pressed forward. "Contact front," Lieutenant Martinez's voice crackled through the comm. The camera feed showed a corridor ahead suddenly filled with void spawn, writhing masses of dark energy that took vaguely humanoid shapes as they approached. These were the hive ship's antibodies, designed to eliminate any foreign presence within the vessel. Zektar expected the Marines to fall back and establish a defensive position, as coalition doctrine dictated when facing superior numbers. Instead, Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "Alpha Team, left flank. Bravo Team, suppressing fire. Charlie Team, follow me up the middle." The humans charged directly into the swarm of entities. Their weapons, primitive kinetic projectiles compared to coalition energy weapons, somehow proved devastatingly effective against the void spawn. Each impact seemed to disrupt the creature's energy matrices, causing them to dissipate in shrieking bursts of light. But it was the humans' behavior that truly disturbed Zektar. They moved through the combat with a fluid coordination that spoke of countless hours of training, but there was something else, an almost predatory joy in their movements. Martinez laughed as he gunned down a particularly large spawn, and Sergeant Williams actually smiled as she tossed an explosive device into a cluster of enemies. "They're enjoying this," Zektar muttered to his tactical officer. "A slender Velkari named Siltha, sir." Siltha's antenna twitched in confusion. The humans. They're not just fighting the spawn. They're enjoying the combat. Zektar's 4 eyes remained fixed on the tactical display showing the Marines' progress. Look at their biometric readings. Elevated heart rate, yes, but also increased production of what their medical files call adrenaline and endorphins. They're experiencing pleasure during combat. This revelation sent ripples of unease through the bridge crew. Every other species in the coalition viewed combat as a necessary evil, something to be endured rather than embraced. The fact that humans might actually derive satisfaction from violence was deeply troubling. The Marines continued their advance, clearing corridor after corridor with ruthless efficiency. They encountered resistance that would have stopped a coalition force twice their size, yet they pressed on with unwavering determination. When Private Johnson was caught by a void spawn's energy tendril and began to be drained of life force, His teammates didn't retreat, they advanced faster, their weapons fire becoming more concentrated and vicious. "Johnson's down," Chen reported, her voice tight with emotion that Zektar's translator couldn't quite parse. "Williams, Martinez, hold this position. Foster, you're with me. We're going to clear a path to the core." What followed was a display of tactical brutality that left Zektar speechless. Chen and Foster moved through the hive ship like a two-person storm of destruction. They used their environment as a weapon, triggering explosive decompression in sealed chambers to flush out hidden enemies, and even turned the ship's own defensive systems against the void spawn by overloading power conduits to create electrical traps. "Commander," Siltha said quietly, "their combat effectiveness is increasing as they sustain casualties. This is contrary to all known psychological profiles." Zektar nodded grimly. He had noticed the same pattern. Rather than becoming more cautious as they lost team members, the humans seemed to become more aggressive, more focused. It was as if the death of their comrades fueled their determination, rather than weakening their resolve. The breakthrough came when Chen's team reached the hive ship's primary power core. The chamber was vast, filled with pulsing conduits of dark energy that fed the vessel's various systems. At the center stood something that defied description, a writhing mass of void energy that seemed to be the ship's controlling intelligence. "Target acquired," Chen reported. "Beginning demolition procedures." But as the Marines began placing their fusion charges, the hive ship's defenses activated with unprecedented fury. Void wraiths phased through the walls, spawn emerged from hidden alcoves, and the very air became charged with hostile energy that interfered with human equipment. "Chen, you need to abort," Zektar transmitted. "The enemy response is too strong. Fall back to your extraction point." There was a pause before Chen responded, and when she did, her voice carried an edge that sent chills through Zektar's exoskeleton. "Negative, Commander. We didn't come this far to turn back now. Foster, arm all charges, full yield." "Ma'am, that will reduce our escape window to less than 3 minutes," Foster protested. "Then we better move fast," Chen replied with what Zektar was beginning to recognize as the human equivalent of a predatory snarl. What happened next would haunt Zektar's dreams for cycles to come. The remaining Marines, now down to just 4 soldiers, turned their final stand into something that transcended mere combat. They fought with a savage elegance that spoke of millions of years of evolutionary refinement, using every tool, every surface, every moment of tactical advantage with deadly precision. When Martinez ran out of ammunition, he drew a primitive metal blade and engaged void spawn in hand-to-hand combat. When Williams' weapon overheated, she used her bare hands to strangle a wraith until its energy matrix collapsed. And through it all they continued to laugh, to call out encouragement to each other, to display the kind of battlefield camaraderie that Zektar had thought was purely mythical. The fusion charges detonated exactly on schedule, sending shockwaves through the hive ship's entire structure. Critical systems began failing in cascade, and the massive vessel started to list as its power core went critical. "Extraction successful," Chen reported as her team reached their boarding ship. "All charges placed and detonated. Enemy vessel is showing critical damage across all systems." As Zektar watched the hive ship begin its death spiral, one thought dominated his mind. If humans could fight like this against humanity's enemies, what would happen if humans ever decided that the coalition itself was the enemy? The cold sensation in his neural cluster spread throughout his entire body as he contemplated that possibility. The victory celebration aboard Station Omega-7 was unlike anything Zektar had experienced in his military career. The destruction of a void swarm hive ship was a rare accomplishment that deserved recognition, but the mood among the coalition forces was subdued. They had witnessed something that challenged their fundamental understanding of warfare and, perhaps more troubling, of their human allies. Captain Chen and her surviving Marines moved through the station's corridors with the same predatory grace they had displayed during combat. Their wounds had been treated in the medical bay, but they showed no signs of the psychological trauma that coalition forces typically experienced after such intense combat. If anything, they seemed energized by their recent victory. Commander Zektar, Chen approached him in the station's central command area. "I wanted to thank you for the tactical support during the operation. Your covering fire was essential to our success." Zektar studied her face, searching for signs of the emotional strain he knew she must be feeling. 3 of her Marines had died during the assault, yet her expression remained calm and focused. "Captain, I must ask, how do your people process combat casualties? Your team lost nearly half its members, yet you show no signs of grief or psychological distress." Chen's expression shifted slightly, and for a moment Zektar caught a glimpse of something deeper beneath her professional demeanor. "We grieve, Commander, but we do it later when the mission is complete and our surviving teammates are safe. Right now, we honor our fallen by making sure their sacrifice meant something." This philosophy puzzled Zektar. In coalition culture, the dead were mourned immediately and extensively. Ritual periods of grief were considered essential for maintaining unit cohesion and psychological health. The human approach seemed almost coldly practical by comparison. Dr. Velan, the station's chief xenopsychologist, had requested a meeting with Zektar to discuss preliminary observations about human combat behavior. They met in her laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing brain scans and stress analysis readings from the recent battle. "The data is remarkable. Commander," Dr. Velan began, her tentacles writhing with excitement. "Human neurology during combat shows patterns we've never encountered in any other sapient species. Their brains actually produce pleasure-inducing chemicals during violent confrontations." The holographic display showed comparative brain scans from various coalition species during combat situations. Where other species showed stress responses, fear reactions, and psychological trauma markers, the human scans revealed something entirely different. "Look at this." Dr. Velan pointed to specific neural activity patterns. "The human brain treats combat as a form of complex problem-solving. Areas associated with pattern recognition, tactical thinking, and reward processing all show increased activity during violent encounters. They're literally programmed to excel at warfare." Zektar examined the data with growing unease. "You're saying they're evolutionarily designed for combat?" "More than that," Dr. Velan replied. "Their entire social structure appears to be built around group violence. Their history is filled with conflicts between their own species, yet they've developed incredibly sophisticated methods of cooperation during these conflicts. They've turned warfare into an art form." The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the station's communications center. A priority message had arrived from Coalition Command, requesting a detailed report on human combat effectiveness and recommendations for future joint operations. As Zektar composed his report, he found himself struggling with how to accurately convey what he had witnessed. The official language of military assessment seemed inadequate to describe the reality of fighting alongside humans. How could he explain that their allies were simultaneously the most effective warriors he had ever seen and the most terrifying? His contemplation was interrupted by a commotion in the station's recreational area. Through the security monitors, he observed what appeared to be a friendly competition between human and coalition soldiers. The humans had organized something they called war games, simulated combat scenarios designed for training and entertainment. What Zektar witnessed challenged his understanding once again. The coalition soldiers, despite their superior technology and training, were consistently outmaneuvered by the humans. It wasn't just a matter of tactical superiority. The humans seemed to anticipate their opponents' moves with uncanny accuracy, adapting their strategies in real time with fluid precision. Lieutenant Martinez, despite his youth and recent injuries, dominated the simulation scenarios. He moved through virtual battlefields like a creature born for conflict, turning disadvantages into advantages and finding creative solutions to impossible tactical situations. Other coalition soldiers began to gather around the displays, watching in fascination as the humans demonstrated combat techniques they had never considered. "They're not just warriors," Siltha observed, as she joined Zektar in watching the exercises. "They're apex predators who've learned to hunt in packs." The comment sent another chill through Zektar's nervous system. He realized that his tactical officer had identified something fundamental about human nature that went beyond mere military capability. These weren't civilized beings who had learned to fight when necessary. These were predators who had learned to be civilized when it served their purposes. That evening, Zektar attended a briefing where Captain Chen presented her team's after-action report. Her analysis of the hive ship assault was thorough and professional, but what struck him most were her recommendations for future operations. The Void Swarm's primary weakness is their reliance on energy-based attacks, Chen explained to the assembled officers. Our kinetic weapons disrupt their quantum coherence in ways that energy weapons cannot. I recommend equipping all boarding parties with projectile weapons for future engagements. But it was her tactical suggestions that truly disturbed Zektar. Chen proposed using the swarm's own psychological warfare tactics against them, exploiting their hive mind mentality through targeted disruption of their command structure. Her strategies involved a level of calculated brutality that made even veteran coalition officers uncomfortable. "Captain," one of the Altarian commanders interjected, "your proposed tactics seem excessive. Surely there are more humane approaches to achieving the same objectives." Chen's response was delivered with the same calm professionalism she had shown throughout their interaction, but Zektar detected an undercurrent of something predatory in her tone. "Commander Tethavar, with respect, the Void Swarm doesn't respond to humane approaches. They're an existential threat to all organic life in this galaxy. Sometimes the most merciful thing you can do to an enemy is to defeat them so completely that they never have the opportunity to harm innocents again." The logic was sound, but the casual way she discussed the complete annihilation of an enemy species left the room in uncomfortable silence. Zektar began to understand that the human concept of warfare wasn't just about achieving tactical objectives. It was about the absolute domination of their opponents. As the briefing concluded and the officers dispersed, Zektar found himself alone with Chen. He decided to voice the concern that had been growing in his mind since the battle began. "Captain, I must ask, what would happen if humans ever decided that the Coalition was their enemy?" Chen studied him for a long moment, and Zektar saw something flicker in her eyes that confirmed his worst fears. "Commander, that's not something you ever want to find out." 3 weeks after the hive ship assault, Zektar found himself obsessively studying human history files that had been provided as part of the cultural exchange program. What he discovered in those records shattered any remaining illusions he had about the nature of Earth's children. The humans called it the Great Filter, the theoretical barrier that prevented most species from achieving interstellar civilization. For most sapient races, this barrier was technological, environmental, or biological. But humans had faced a different kind of filter, themselves. Their homeworld's history was a catalog of violence that spanned millennia. Wars fought with sticks and stones had evolved into conflicts capable of rendering entire continents uninhabitable. Yet somehow, instead of destroying themselves as every predictive model suggested they should have, they had emerged stronger, more unified, and more capable than ever before. "They fought themselves for 10,000 years, Zektar said to Dr. Velan during one of their regular consultation sessions. Species-wide conflicts that should have led to extinction instead became learning experiences. They studied their own capacity for violence and turned it into a science. Dr. Velan nodded grimly as she displayed holographic reconstructions of human historical battles. "Look at the progression, Commander. From simple tribal conflicts to globe-spanning wars involving billions of participants. Each generation developed more sophisticated methods of organized violence, yet they also developed more sophisticated methods of cooperation. The data was staggering. Humans had fought wars with weapons that could destroy their entire civilization, yet they had somehow managed to pull back from the brink of annihilation repeatedly. Each near-extinction event had taught them more about themselves, about the nature of conflict, and about the delicate balance between competition and cooperation. Here's what truly disturbs me," Dr. Velan continued, highlighting specific data points. "They never actually eliminated warfare from their culture. They simply redirected it. When they achieved global unity, they turned their competitive instincts toward exploration, technological advancement, and the conquest of space itself." Zektar studied the files showing humanity's expansion into their solar system. Every achievement had been framed in terms of conquest. Conquering space, conquering other worlds, conquering the fundamental forces of nature. Even their peaceful scientific endeavors carried the language and mindset of warfare. A priority alert interrupted their discussion. Long-range sensors had detected another void swarm incursion, this time targeting a coalition colony world with over 50 million inhabitants. The nearest military response was hours away, but Captain Chen had volunteered her remaining Marines for an immediate intervention mission. "Commander," Chen's voice came through the comm system, "we're taking the Indomitable to provide advanced reconnaissance and harassment while the main fleet mobilizes. Request permission to engage targets of opportunity." Zektar hesitated. The humans had proven their effectiveness, but sending a single ship against what appeared to be a full swarm battle group seemed like suicide. Captain, preliminary scans show at least 12 capital ships and supporting escorts. You'll be outnumbered 100 to 1. Roger that, Commander. Sounds like a fair fight. The casual confidence in Chen's voice sent familiar chills through Zektar's nervous system. He was beginning to understand that what other species considered overwhelming odds, humans viewed as interesting tactical challenges. He watched through long-range sensors as the Indomitable accelerated toward the enemy fleet. The small human vessel moved with the same predatory grace he had observed during their boarding action. But this time they were hunting something much larger than themselves. All coalition units. This is Marine Leader. Chen's voice carried across the communication channels. Beginning attack run on enemy formation. Recommend maintaining safe distance until main fleet arrives. What followed defied every principle of space combat that Zektar had learned during his career. Instead of engaging the swarm fleet directly, the Indomitable began what could only be described as a harassment campaign. It would dart in at maximum speed, unleash devastating volleys of kinetic projectiles at critical enemy systems, then disappear into the sensor shadows of nearby asteroids before the enemy could respond effectively. The swarm ships, designed for overwhelming frontal assaults, struggled to adapt to this hit-and-run approach. Their energy weapons were too slow to track the rapidly moving human ship, and their pursuit vessels found themselves led into carefully prepared ambushes among the asteroid field. They're not trying to win, Siltha observed as she analyzed the tactical display. They're trying to make the enemy angry. Zektar realized his tactical officer was correct. The humans weren't attempting to destroy the swarm fleet. They were deliberately provoking it into making tactical mistakes. Each attack was precisely calculated to cause maximum frustration, while minimizing their own exposure to counterattack. Chen, what's your objective? Zektar transmitted. Your current approach won't significantly damage the enemy fleet. Negative, Commander. Current approach is working exactly as intended. Watch the enemy formation. As Zektar focused on the swarm fleet's movements, he began to understand the subtle brilliance of Chen's strategy. The constant harassment was forcing the enemy ships to break formation as they attempted to pursue the elusive human vessel. What had started as a coordinated battle group was gradually dissolving into a scattered collection of individual ships, each pursuing their own vendetta against the humans. They're using the enemy's aggression against them. Dr. Velan's voice carried wonder and horror in equal measure. The humans understand that predators become vulnerable when they're angry. The truth of that observation became clear when the coalition fleet arrived. Instead of facing a unified enemy formation, they found the swarm ships scattered across several light minutes of space, isolated and vulnerable to concentrated attack. The battle that should have been a desperate defense became a systematic elimination of disorganized enemy units. In the aftermath, as the last swarm vessels were destroyed or driven off, Zektar received a communication from Coalition Command. Admiral Kethmore, the Supreme Military Commander, appeared on the holographic display with an expression that mixed admiration and unease. Commander Zektar, I've reviewed the tactical reports from today's engagement. Captain Chen's performance was extraordinary. However, I have concerns about the implications of human combat doctrine. Zektar had been expecting this conversation. Sir, the humans have proven to be exceptionally effective allies. Their tactical innovations have saved countless coalition lives. That's precisely what concerns me, Commander. Admiral Kethmore's image shifted slightly as he leaned forward. I've been analyzing their historical records, their psychological profiles, their approach to warfare. These beings have spent their entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of killing their own species. Now they're applying those same skills to our enemies. The Admiral paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a weight that Zektar had never heard before. Commander, what happens when they decide we're no longer useful allies? What happens when humanity realizes that every other species in the galaxy is essentially defenseless against them? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. Zektar found himself thinking about Captain Chen's casual confidence, about the way her Marines had laughed during combat, about the predatory intelligence behind their tactics. Sir, Zektar said finally, I believe the humans are loyal allies, but I also believe we need to be very careful never to give them a reason to be otherwise. Admiral Kethmore nodded grimly. My thoughts exactly, Commander. We're going to need contingency plans. The classified meeting took place in the deepest levels of Coalition Command, in a chamber shielded from all forms of electronic surveillance. Admiral Kethmore had assembled representatives from every major species in the Coalition, and the topic of discussion was humanity's place in their alliance. Zektar found himself serving as the primary military liaison, given his extensive experience working alongside human forces. As he entered the chamber, he noted the tension in the room was almost tangible. Species that had fought alongside each other for decades were now viewing their most effective allies with suspicion and fear. Gentlemen, Admiral Kethmore began, we are here to discuss what the Xenopsychology Department has classified as the human problem. Dr. Velan, please present your findings. The holographic displays around the chamber activated, showing detailed analyses of human behavior, psychology, and military capability. Dr. Velan's tentacles writhed with nervous energy as she began her presentation. After extensive study, we have concluded that humanity represents a unique form of sapient life. They are what we have termed apex social predators, a species that has evolved sophisticated cooperation specifically to enhance their ability to engage in organized violence. The display showed comparative evolutionary trees, where other coalition species had developed intelligence as a survival mechanism against environmental threats. Humans had developed it primarily as a weapon against other humans. Their entire social structure is based on competitive hierarchies that can rapidly reorganize for coordinated action. They form emotional bonds with group members while simultaneously developing strategies to defeat potential enemies. Most disturbing, they appear to derive genuine pleasure from successful acts of violence. Commander Istek of the Serpentine Hegemony raised a scaled appendage. Dr. Velan, are you saying that humans are inherently violent? Many species have aggressive tendencies. Not like this, Dr. Velan replied. Other species fight for resources, territory, or survival. Humans fight for abstract concepts, honor, ideology, revenge, or simply for the intellectual challenge of defeating an opponent. They have developed warfare into a form of art. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Zektar thought about his conversations with Captain Chen, about the casual way she discussed the complete destruction of enemy forces, about the laughter of her Marines during combat. There's more, Dr. Velan continued. Human historical records show that they have never, in their entire recorded history, gone more than a few decades without engaging in organized warfare somewhere on their planet. Even when they achieved global unity, they immediately began preparing for conflicts with hypothetical alien enemies. Admiral Kethmore activated another set of displays showing human military preparations before first contact. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire solar system before they ever encountered another sapient species. Their first question when meeting us wasn't about trade, culture, or scientific exchange. It was whether we represented a military threat. General Korthak of the Granite Confederation spoke up, his rocky voice rumbling through the chamber's acoustics. Admiral, with respect, these same qualities make them exceptionally valuable allies. Their performance against the Void Swarm has been unprecedented. That's precisely the problem, Admiral Kethmore replied. They're too effective. Every tactical innovation they introduce gives them an advantage not just over our enemies but over us as well. They're learning our weaknesses while demonstrating their own strengths. Zektar felt compelled to speak. Sirs, I've worked closely with Captain Chen and her Marines. They've shown nothing but loyalty to the Coalition. Their sacrifice during the hive ship assault saved thousands of Coalition lives. Commander, Dr. Velan interjected, human loyalty is conditional and pragmatic. They form alliances based on mutual benefit. But their history shows they have no moral qualms about betraying former allies when circumstances change. They call it realpolitik, the subordination of moral considerations to practical necessity. The discussion continued for hours, with various officials presenting evidence of human capabilities and potential threats. The pattern that emerged was deeply troubling. Humanity possessed overwhelming military superiority, combined with a cultural willingness to use that superiority when it served their interests. What are you proposing? Zektar asked finally. That we terminate our alliance with humanity? That would be strategically disastrous, not to mention morally questionable. Admiral Kethmore exchanged glances with his fellow commanders before responding. We're proposing careful management of the relationship, limitation of their access to sensitive military technology, gradual reduction of their integration into coalition command structures, and development of contingency plans for potential future conflicts. The word contingency hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Zektar realized they were discussing preparations for war against their own allies. Admiral, he said carefully, if humans are as perceptive as we believe, they'll notice these changes. What happens when they realize we're preparing to betray them? The question silenced the room. Everyone present understood the implications. If humanity discovered coalition plans for containment or betrayal, they would likely act first. Dr. Velan provided the most chilling answer. Based on our psychological profiles, they'll view it as confirmation that they were right to be suspicious of us from the beginning. Humans have a saying, peace through superior firepower. They believe that the only way to ensure security is to be stronger than all potential enemies combined. As the meeting concluded,
Zektar found himself assigned to a new position, Human Liaison Coordinator.
Officially, this was a promotion recognizing his successful cooperation with human forces. Unofficially, he understood that he was being positioned to monitor human activities and report any signs of potential disloyalty. Walking through the corridors of Station Omega-7 after returning from the classified briefing, Zektar observed the human Marines with new eyes. They moved with the same predatory grace, maintained the same professional demeanor, showed the same loyalty to their coalition colleagues. Yet now he couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching apex predators who were simply choosing not to hunt their companions. Captain Chen approached him in the station's central hub, her expression friendly and professional. Commander, I heard about your promotion. Congratulations. I'm looking forward to continuing our cooperation. Thank you, Captain, Zektar replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I value our partnership as well. As Chen walked away, Zektar noticed something he had missed before. The way other species instinctively moved aside as she passed. Not out of respect or deference, but out of some deep, evolutionary recognition that they were in the presence of a more efficient predator. For the first time since meeting humanity, Zektar wondered if the Coalition's greatest victory, gaining humanity as an ally, might also be the beginning of their greatest defeat. 6 months into his role as Human Liaison Coordinator, Zektar had developed what he privately called the fear. It was a constant awareness that humanity was watching, learning and preparing for possibilities that other coalition species couldn't even conceive. Every interaction with human personnel felt like being studied by a predator that was deciding whether you were a threat, prey, or simply irrelevant. The humans had continued to excel in every joint operation, saving coalition lives and achieving objectives that seemed impossible by conventional standards. Yet their very success had created a growing paranoia within coalition leadership. How could beings be so effective at warfare yet claim to be peaceful allies? Zektar's daily reports to Admiral Kethmore had become exercises in careful observation and diplomatic language. He documented human tactical innovations, their integration with coalition forces, and their apparent loyalty to the alliance. But beneath each report was an undercurrent of unease that grew stronger with each passing day. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine intelligence briefing. Captain Chen had requested access to coalition defensive protocols for the core worlds, information that would normally be shared with senior allied officers. The request was reasonable, professional, and entirely justified. By her position as head of human military operations in the sector, it was also exactly the kind of intelligence that would be invaluable to anyone planning an assault on coalition space. Commander, Admiral Kethmore's voice carried across the secure communication channel. This request confirms our worst fears. They're positioning themselves to understand our defensive capabilities. Zektar studied the formal request documents on his desk. Chen's reasoning was sound. Human forces needed to understand coalition defensive systems to provide effective support during joint operations. But the information she was requesting would also provide a complete map of every weakness in their most critical military installations. Sir, it's possible this is exactly what it appears to be. A professional request for operational intelligence, Zektar said. though he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. "Commander, I need you to deny this request. Find a bureaucratic reason, security clearance issues, anything that will delay human access to this information." The order went against everything Zektar had learned about military cooperation, but he understood the Admiral's concerns. The problem was that denying the request would signal to the humans that they were no longer fully trusted allies. When Zektar informed Captain Chen of the delay in processing her request, her reaction was subtle but telling. Her professional demeanor never wavered, but he caught a brief flicker in her eyes that suggested she understood exactly what the delay meant. "I see," Chen said calmly. "Well, I'm sure the bureaucratic processes will resolve themselves in time. In the meantime, my people will continue to work with whatever information we have available." That afternoon, Zektar discovered that human technical specialists had somehow gained access to maintenance records for coalition defensive systems. When questioned, the humans explained that they had requested the information from junior technicians who assumed it was part of routine cooperation protocols. The maintenance records contained essentially the same information as the intelligence files. Chen had been denied. "They went around our security measures in less than 6 hours. Zektar reported to Admiral Kethmore. "Sir, I don't think they were trying to hide their actions. I think they were sending us a message." The message was clear. Human intelligence capabilities were sophisticated enough to obtain any information they needed, with or without official cooperation. The request for formal access had been a courtesy, not a necessity. Admiral Kethmore's response was swift and decisive. "Commander, we're implementing Protocol 7 immediately. All human personnel are to be isolated from sensitive coalition operations. I want them reassigned to frontier duties where they can't access critical intelligence." Protocol 7 was the coalition's contingency plan for dealing with potentially hostile allied forces. It involved gradual separation, intelligence compartmentalization, and preparation for possible conflict. Zektar felt a cold dread as he realized they were moving from suspicion to active preparation for war against humanity. The implementation of Protocol 7 required careful coordination. To avoid alerting human personnel to the change in their status, human Marines were reassigned to patrol duties in remote sectors. Human technical specialists were transferred to projects that kept them away from sensitive coalition systems. Human officers were excluded from strategic planning sessions under various bureaucratic pretexts. Captain Chen's reaction to these changes was perhaps the most frightening thing Zektar had witnessed since meeting humanity. She accepted each reassignment with perfect professional courtesy, never questioning the decisions or expressing any dissatisfaction with her reduced responsibilities. But Zektar noticed that human personnel had begun subtly changing their behavior patterns. They spent more time in private communication with each other. They requested increased training exercises and weapons maintenance periods. Most disturbing, they had begun asking casual questions about coalition fleet movements and defensive preparations. "They know," Zektar reported to Admiral Kethmore during their weekly briefing. "The humans are aware that we're implementing containment protocols, and they're preparing for the possibility of conflict." "Evidence?" the Admiral requested. "Circumstantial but compelling. Human energy consumption has increased by 30%, consistent with enhanced weapons and equipment maintenance. Their communication patterns show increased encryption and frequency, and 3 human officers have submitted requests for detailed star charts of coalition space, ostensibly for navigation training." Admiral Kethmore was silent for several moments before responding. "Commander, how long do you estimate before the humans make their move?" The question crystallized Zektar's worst fears. They were now operating under the assumption that human betrayal was inevitable, and the only question was timing. "Sir, I don't think they'll move unless they perceive an immediate threat to their own security. But if they believe we're planning to take action against them, they'll strike first," the Admiral finished. "Yes, that's consistent with their psychological profiles. Commander, I need you to maintain normal relations with Captain Chen while we finalize our preparations." "How long can you maintain the illusion of trust?" Zektar thought about Chen's intelligent eyes, about the way she seemed to read the intentions of everyone around her with predatory clarity. "Sir, I don't think there is an illusion of trust anymore. I think we're all just waiting to see who moves first." That night, as Zektar walked through the corridors of Station Omega 7, He found himself cataloging potential defensive positions and escape routes. The human Marines he passed nodded respectfully, but he could feel their eyes following him with new intensity. The most terrifying realization was that everyone, human and coalition alike, was now preparing for the same war. But no one wanted to be the first to admit it was inevitable. The crisis began with what appeared to be a routine void swarm incursion in the Kepler sector. Long-range sensors detected a massive enemy fleet approaching the coalition's primary shipyards, where humanity's most advanced vessels were being constructed under a joint development program. The approaching enemy force was larger than anything previously encountered, requiring the immediate deployment of all available coalition and human assets. Admiral Kethmore's emergency briefing was attended by senior officers from every member species, including Captain Chen representing human forces. As tactical displays showed the magnitude of the approaching threat, Zektar noticed something that made his blood run cold. This was the perfect scenario for the conflict everyone had been dreading. The enemy fleet will reach the shipyards in 18 hours, Admiral Kethmore announced. We'll need every ship, every Marine, every tactical advantage we can deploy. This includes full integration of human and coalition forces. The irony was bitter. The very security protocols designed to contain humanity now had to be abandoned to face an external threat. Human personnel would need access to coalition command systems, defensive plans, and strategic assets. Exactly the intelligence they had been denied for months. Captain Chen stepped forward with her characteristic calm professionalism. Admiral, human forces are ready for immediate deployment. However, we'll need access to current coalition tactical databases and defensive protocols to coordinate effectively. The request hung in the air like an ultimatum. Everyone in the room understood the implications. Deny the humans the intelligence they needed and face the void swarm with reduced effectiveness. Grant their request, and provide them with everything necessary to turn against the coalition after the external threat was eliminated. Admiral Kethmore made the only decision possible under the circumstances. Granted, Captain. Commander Zektar will coordinate intelligence sharing and tactical integration. As the briefing dispersed and officers rushed to prepare for battle, Zektar found himself alone with Chen in the command center. The moment he had been dreading for months had finally arrived, a situation where coalition survival depended on trusting their most dangerous allies. Commander, Chen said quietly. I know about Protocol 7. Zektar felt his exoskeleton lock in surprise. Captain, I don't know what you're referring to. Please. Chen's voice carried a weariness that he had never heard before. My people have known about the containment protocols for months. We've been waiting for you to decide whether we're allies or enemies. The directness of her statement left Zektar speechless. All their careful deception, all their security measures had been transparent to human intelligence from the beginning. We know you're afraid of us, Chen continued. Honestly, you should be. My species has capabilities that yours can't match, and we've proven that we're willing to use them when necessary. But there's something you need to understand about humanity. We honor our commitments. She activated a holographic display showing human fleet movements over the past several months. Instead of the aggressive positioning that coalition intelligence had feared, the display showed human forces consistently maintaining defensive postures and supporting coalition operations without any attempt to gain strategic advantages. Every time you've tested our loyalty, we've chosen cooperation over self-interest, Chen said. When you denied us intelligence, we could have taken it by force, but we waited. When you isolated our personnel, we could have interpreted it as an act of war, but we maintained discipline. When you prepared contingency plans against us, we prepared contingency plans to defend you. The last statement hit Zektar like a physical blow. Defend us? Chen's expression shifted, revealing the predatory intelligence that had always lurked beneath her professional demeanor. Commander, do you really think the Void Swarm's timing is coincidental? This attack is designed to force exactly the situation we're facing now, a choice between cooperation and mutual destruction. The implications were staggering. If Chen was right, then the Void Swarm had been manipulating coalition and human relations from the beginning, engineering the current crisis to destabilize their alliance. The enemy has been studying us just as carefully as we've been studying each other, Chen continued. They understand that fear and suspicion are more effective weapons than any energy cannon. They've been waiting for us to destroy each other so they can claim the ruins. As if summoned by her words, Priority alerts began sounding throughout the command center. The approaching Void Swarm fleet had suddenly accelerated, cutting their arrival time to 6 hours. Simultaneously, Coalition long-range sensors detected energy signatures consistent with cloaked enemy infiltration units already within the system. They're not just attacking the shipyards, Zektar realized as he studied the tactical displays. They're targeting command and control systems throughout Coalition space. This is a coordinated assault on our entire infrastructure. Chen nodded grimly. And the only way to stop it is perfect cooperation between human and Coalition forces. We need to trust each other completely, or we'll lose everything. The next few hours became a blur of coordinated activity that pushed both species beyond their normal capabilities. Human tactical innovation combined with Coalition technological superiority created defensive strategies that neither could have achieved alone. The barriers that had been erected between the two forces dissolved in the face of shared necessity. Zektar found himself working directly with human intelligence specialists, sharing information that would have been classified hours earlier. What he discovered was that humanity had been preparing not for war against the Coalition, but for war alongside them. Their intelligence gathering had been focused on understanding Coalition weaknesses so they could provide better protection. The battle itself was unlike anything in recorded military history. Void Swarm forces attacked on multiple fronts simultaneously, requiring split-second coordination between human and Coalition units across vast distances. The humans' ability to adapt their tactics in real time proved essential, as the enemy revealed capabilities that no previous encounter had suggested. Captain, Chen commanded the defense from the bridge of her flagship, but her authority extended across species lines in ways that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Coalition officers found themselves following human tactical doctrines that contradicted their training but proved devastatingly effective against the enemy. When the Void Swarm's main assault reached the shipyards, it was Chen who made the decision that saved the day. Instead of defending the facilities, she ordered their complete evacuation and then detonated the shipyard's fusion reactors, creating an energy discharge that disrupted the enemy fleet's quantum coherence across multiple flight seconds. The sacrifice was enormous. Years of joint research and development destroyed in minutes, but it broke the back of the Void Swarm offensive. The surviving enemy units retreated into hyperspace, leaving behind wreckage and the realization that the crisis had fundamentally changed the relationship between humanity and the Coalition. In the aftermath, as damage reports filtered in and casualties were counted, Admiral Kethmore addressed the combined fleet. Today we learned that our greatest strength isn't our technology or our individual capabilities. It's our ability to trust each other when survival depends on it. Zektar stood beside Captain Chen on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the debris field that had once been humanity's most advanced construction projects. Captain, why did your people never reveal that you knew about our containment protocols? Chen was quiet for a moment before responding. Because we understood why you were afraid. In your position, we would have made the same preparations. The difference is that we chose to prove we could be trusted, rather than demanding trust we hadn't earned. As Zektar reflected on the events of the past day, he realized that his fear of humanity had been transformed into something entirely different. Respect. They were still the most dangerous allies he could imagine. But they were allies by choice rather than convenience. The war against the Void Swarm would continue, but it would be fought by partners who had learned to fear the right enemies. And perhaps most importantly, Zektar had learned that sometimes the most frightening beings could also be the most trustworthy, because they understood the true cost of betrayal. His first true fear while fighting beside humans had been that they might one day become his enemies. Now he feared what the galaxy would be like if they weren't his allies.